The Baltimore Ravens have been one of the best teams in the NFL with Lamar Jackson under center. We are reminded of this when looking at the level of difficulty they are going to be facing with the release of the 2025 schedule. Since the start of the 2019 season, the Ravens have played in 100 games, winning 68 of them and averaging 11.3 wins and 5.3 losses per season. They've won the division 3 times over that span and had the number 1 seed in the AFC twice. While having said all that, a commonly held view within the Ravens fan base is that the Ravens are notorious for playing down to the competition when facing below average teams. And that got me thinking, is it true? Do the Ravens, statistically speaking, play noticeably worse when facing teams with a record below 500? After some research into the matter, I found some very interesting patterns emerging, and while the overall answer is no, not necessarily, there may be reasons why the majority of the fan base thinks that we do. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Welcome in everyone, this is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and before we dive straight in, let's go over some of the important criteria and conditions that were necessary in determining these results. The first is that the objective of this research was to see how well the Ravens played when facing teams over and under 500, meaning that any game that was played against a team that had a record of 500 exactly going into the matchup is not being included. This leads me to the second condition. The over-under record considered for each team was the one they carried into each individual game when facing the Ravens, not at the end of the season. This means that all Week 1 games of each season have been taken out of the data. With these two rules in place, the 100 games from these 6 seasons goes down to 85, and with dismissing no more than a few games per season, the slightly smaller sample size has a negligible impact on the outcome. Let's start by looking at each year and see if there is any early signs of obvious problems the Ravens have had when facing teams that had a sub-500 record. In 2019, the Ravens played in 14 games where their opponents fit the parameters I listed earlier. The only 2 that didn't qualify was their dominant Week 1 game against the Dolphins and Week 2 versus the Cardinals, as Arizona had a record of 0-0-1 after tying with Detroit in Week 1. Of the games that did qualify, 8 of them were against teams with a record over 500, and in those games they went 7-1, with their only loss at the hands of the Chiefs in Week 3. They had 6 games where they faced opponents with a record under 500, and they went 5-1 in those games, only losing to the Browns in Week 4, who were 1-2 at the time. This game is one that many fans might remember because after this loss to the Browns, the Ravens didn't lose a single one for the rest of the regular season, ripping off 12 wins in a row. In 2020, the Ravens played in 15 games against opponents that qualified, with the only game that didn't being their Week 1 game against the Browns. The Ravens were in 6 games this season where they faced opponents who had a record over 500. Unlike 2019, though, they weren't as successful in these games, going 2-4, with losses to the Chiefs in Week 3, the Titans in Week 11, and both Week 8 and Week 2 Steelers games. In games against teams with records under 500, of which they had 9, they went 8-1, the only loss being another memorable one as it was to Cam Newton and the Patriots during a massive rainstorm. Through the first 2 seasons, the Ravens look pretty good. Over the 29 games, they had a record of 9 wins and 5 losses to teams over 500, with a record of 13-2 against teams under 500. In the following season, 2021, the Ravens had 3 games that didn't count. They were Week 1 against the Raiders, Week 13 against the 5-5-1 Steelers, and Week 14 against the 6-6 Browns. Of the 14 games that did count, this was the year that the regular season went from 16 games to 17, the Ravens faced 9 opponents with winning records and went 4-5 against them, with several coming at the end of the season. Against teams with losing records, the Ravens went 4-1 in 5 games. Their only loss was to the Miami Dolphins in Week 10 in a game which became known to Ravens fans as the Cover Zero game due to the Dolphins blitzing on 40 of the Ravens' 73 offensive stats, a staggering 55%. In 2022, the Ravens again faced 14 opponents that met the requirements, leaving 3 that did not. Week 1, of course, against the Jets, Week 3 against the 1-1 Patriots, and Week 5 against the 2-2 Bengals. Each of these 3 games were wins for the Ravens. The rest of the 14 games were somewhat less impressive. Against the 4 opponents they faced who came into their matchup with records over 500, the Ravens went 0-4, with losses to the Dolphins in Week 3, the Bills in Week 4, the Giants in Week 6, and the Bengals in Week 18. For those of you who are counting, they will know that that means we had 10 opponents that were under 500, but despite this advantage, the Ravens went 7-3 in these games. Losses to the Jaguars in Week 12, the Browns in Week 15, and the Steelers in Week 17 are the most the Ravens have had in a season since before the Lamar era began. Something that should be noted here was that for the Weeks 15, 17, and 18 losses, Lamar Jackson was inactive after suffering a knee injury that kept him out of the final 5 games of the season. If the 2022 season has you worried, though, don't be, because 2023 is here, and this was a year of total domination by the Ravens. Though there were only 13 games that fit the criteria established and 4 games that won't be counted, it is plenty to get the point across. Those games that won't be counted are Week 1 against the Texans, Week 3 against the Colts, who were 1-1, the Week 5 Steelers, who were 2-2, and the Week 14 Rams, who were 6-6 at the time. Despite these games not counting, the Ravens were 2-2 in them, so it cancels out anyway. Of the 13 games that do count, 9 of them were against teams with winning records, and the Ravens came out of those 9 with a record of 7-2, only dropping games to the Browns in Week 10 and the Steelers in Week 18, which was another game without Lamar. This leaves only 4 games against teams under 500, and the Ravens won them all. Let's do a quick check to see where things stand before the final season. Through the 70 games that we've seen so far, the Ravens have gone 20-16 when facing teams over 500 and 28-6 against teams with records under 500. 2021 and 2022 were kind of rough, but 2023 brought things back a bit. Let's get to our last season and make a determination after that. So finally, we get to the most recent season for the Baltimore Ravens, 2024. The Ravens only had 2 games that didn't count for this season, and those were in Week 1 with the loss to the Chiefs, and in Week 3 in a win over the Dallas Cowboys, who were 1-1. This means that the Ravens had 15 games, and of those, they once again faced off against 9 teams over 500, and came out with a record of 7-2 yet again. Losses to the Steelers in Week 11 and the Eagles in Week 13 are the ones that they dropped, but overall, a more than solid effort after facing nearly double-digit winning teams for the second year in a row. This does mean that they faced 6 teams that were under 500, and while their record of 4-2 against those teams mean they finished with more wins than losses, but their defeat at the hands of the lowly Raiders in Week 2 and the dysfunctional Jameis Winston-led Browns in Week 8 left many fans feeling undeserving of celebration. But that feeling is a big part of why the Ravens fans commonly believe as though their beloved team, who is usually so offensively dominant and defensively smothering, can't handle teams they should statistically destroy. Through these 85 games, the Ravens are 27-18 when facing teams with records over 500. We play the good teams well because we are a good team. We've won 60% of games against teams over 500, and that's while 45 of those 85 games were against winning teams. But we also play great against teams with records under 500 too. In those final 40 games, the Ravens are 32-8, meaning that they beat teams with losing records 80% of the time. One reason that fans might think we don't play up to our usual standard against bad teams is recency bias. We lost 2 games that we should have won in 2024, but many fans will forget about the penalties and injuries that had a serious impact on those games. Another reason fans might think we lose to teams we consider to be worse than us is that the 13 games Lamar has been inactive for over these 85, the Ravens have gone 4-9. Before Lamar got injured at the start of the second quarter in the Week 14 game against the Browns in 2021, the Ravens were an 8-4 team. With Lamar out for the season, they lost not only that Cleveland game, but the final 4 as well, finishing 8-9 and last in the division. In 2022, Lamar had his knee injury in the Denver game, and while the Ravens did get 2 more wins that year, it was against the 5-7 Steelers and the 5-10 Falcons. These collapses and losses are stuck in our minds, and while the Ravens are 3-2 against teams under 500 without Lamar, they are 1-7 against teams over 500. And this leads me to my final point and the final result of my research. The major reason that so many Ravens fans think we don't play well against teams that are below average is because when we do lose, it's an anomaly. When your team wins more than half the time against winning teams and wins 8 out of 10 times against losing teams, it is going to be a shock when they drop one. In this video alone, I've pointed out several losses that the Ravens have had to teams who were sub 500, and I can guarantee that a lot of you could already name most of them before I even brought them up, and that's because it sticks out in your mind. Lamar Jackson has started in 87 regular season games since the beginning of the 2019 season, and he's won 64 of them, which is a nearly 74% win rate. He has lost 23 of those games, but of those 23 losses, only 6 were to teams below 500, meaning that out of all 87 regular season games that the Lamar Jackson-led Baltimore Ravens have played, they've lost just under 7% of them to teams below 500, and only ever twice in one season. Put simply, the Ravens win a lot of games with Lamar Jackson at quarterback, and when they don't, it's weird. With so many talented teams in front of us in this upcoming 2025 season, where we once again will be facing 9 teams that finished last year with records above 500, it's surprising that most Ravens fans will look at this schedule and be excited for the challenges it presents, rather than the difficulty that we may face. I guess when you have Lamar Jackson under center, you get used to thinking you'll win every game, but like Patrick Swayze says in Roadhouse, it's amazing what you can get used to. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and realize that the Ravens don't play down to their competition, but sometimes teams play up to theirs. If you did, give the video a like, subscribe if you're new, and comment down below your favorite game where the Ravens demolished a sub-500 team. As always, guys, stay safe out there, and go Ravens.